Welcome to the RightsCon studio. I'm Melissa Chan, and we're in conversation the next 30 minutes with Jawad Fairouz. As usual, post your questions in the chat box, and we'll get to as many questions as possible. Now, Jawad Fairouz is chairman and founder of Salam for Democracy and Human Rights. He's a former Bahraini member of parliament who resigned in 2011 over the government's violent response to protesters during the Arab Spring. He was later detained and tortured, and while overseas, he was stripped of his citizenship. And essentially, he's become stateless and been living in exile ever since. So statelessness is an issue that he very much advocates for. Some of you may already have seen him. He presented a lightning talk entitled "Are Human Rights Linked to Good Governance? Bahrain and the 2022 Parliamentary Elections." And his short film was also shown in that session. Jawad Fairouz, welcome.
Thanks a lot, Melissa, and good to be with you and with the rest of our audience today.
I'd like to start with your status, statelessness. This is something that happens to a lot of people. Certainly in my personal experience, I've interviewed Uyghurs overseas. They hold a Chinese passport. They were living and working overseas, and you can well imagine that there was no desire to go back to China, where they would inevitably be put in detention camps. So many Uyghurs have stayed overseas, and their passports have expired, or even when they go to the Chinese embassy has, essentially ripped their passport apart. So can you give people a sense of what it means to be stateless and the limits of how you can live?
Unfortunately, one of the biggest grave human rights violation which is ongoing in this planet that there are stateless people. And the most grave part of it that if you already have a nationality and by sudden your nationality will be revoked and you become stateless, like my case, and the clear sequence of it that you're going to be unknown person. At the same time, all your basic rights it will be deprived, and saying that you don't have an official document, you cannot travel, you cannot have the basic services, either by state you are living in or your own country, and even all your civil political rights will be deprived. Usually, I call it's like a social death, that it's look like you are not existing, and all entire your day-to-day life will be so complicated that you cannot be engaged. We have this phenomenon on this planet, unfortunately, although UNHCR, they launched a campaign, I Belong, since 2014, and there are a huge international campaigns with so many international NGOs and UN human rights bodies that try to challenge it. But as I can see, and especially when someone like me that already had a nationality, been elected member, and by sudden his nationality will be revoked due to the political decisions without any judicial process, without any clear evidence, just due to a wish and the demand of the political authorities to target and revenge from the political opinions, even if they are being elected members. Like my case, I've been elected as a councillor for 4 years and elected member of the parliament for 5 to 6 years, yet I could find by sudden my case is being dealt by the authorities as an opponent, and then they revoked my nationality. It started in November 2012, then they gradually increased the revoking nationality of the citizens till it reached almost 990. So I think now the time comes that international community should have all joint effort to either to solve gradually the issue of the statelessness or to prevent any states revoke the nationality of their citizens.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Now, can you tell me a little bit about your organization, Salam for Democracy and Human Rights?
Yes, we mainly focus over three main issues: human rights, sustainable development, and political reforms through adopting democratic principles, measures, and so on. We believe that the security and stability in this planet can be maintained if each state adopted this comprehensive package of evaluation through, first of all, they have to have continuous political reform by adopting democratic value. Then they should have a sustainable developments program, part of the governmental programs. All that should be based on the human rights principles, which is going to be a part of the International Human Rights Convention and so on. So we are encouraging a lot this type of the adaptation, and we are engaged on a lot of activities, campaigns, and so on. And meantime, we focus in general in the MENA, in the Gulf region in general, and specifically in Bahrain, where we are in contact with the victims. We are asking for the accountability, and we try to spread as much as we can the awareness about the human rights values. And we believe that more people, and especially the victims and their family, they are in contacts with different UN treaty bodies, and they are aware of their basic human rights more. They can make a good campaign and reduce whatever harassment and targeting is being opposed of them. But at the end, it should all that to be related to the local legislation, which we are fighting for to amend and upgrade the local legislation to be the standard of international conventions of the human rights.
You know, you mentioned the work that you do in the MENA region. I want to go back to about 10 years ago. This is when Access Now started out during that period of the Arab Spring. And the organization, as you know, has hosted RightsCon in Tunisia in 2019. I'm curious what you think. Where do things stand in the Middle East, particularly the Gulf, a decade later after the Arab Spring? It seems really grim.
First of all, we can see, due to the lackness of any adaptation of the continuous political reform, as I indicated, due to unrealistic measures where the authorities, they deal with opposition in general, and absence of freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, absence of the basic political rights and civil rights. We can see such uprising is continuing occasionally. If we can take Bahrain as example, since a century, and we can see this each decade we are facing an uprising, because the basic citizenship right is in absence, and people are demanding that they want to have their basic rights. So with regard to the better income, political rights, the human rights to be respected, and so on. So after the Arab Spring sparked in Tunisia in December 2010, as everyone knows, that has been spreaded in Arab world, in Egypt, in Yemen, in Syria, and it continued in Bahrain. Bahrain was part of it, although Bahrain being in so much type of the political crisis since a long time back, but it was a chance that for the people to be in the street and demand their basic rights, and demand the reform and power share in the government. As we can realize that Bahrain, unfortunately, it is an absolute monarchy, where entire power in the hand of the ruling family, all three bodies, legislative body, executive body, and judiciary body in the hand of the ruling family, and the people demanded their rights. And at the beginning, it was good turnout, and I believe that it was a good chance for some a positive change on that region, MENA region in general, in the Gulf, and part of it Bahrain. But unfortunately, due to what being called counter-revolutionary governments and states, all that being collapsed, and with the let me say silence of the Western government, and maybe sometimes is being looked at the type of the conspiracy with these governments the counter-revolutionary succeeded to suppress and to crash all these type of the political uprising. And now we can see that entire control is in the hand of these governments. It's being controlled, has been called by security iron fist, and basic rights are being suppressed. There is no chance for any type of the freedom of expression, freedom of assembly, and the rest. And as I indicated, many grave human rights violations have been acted, starting with continuous of death penalty, systematic torture, revocation of nationality, and forcible deportation of the country, which we have it like in Bahrain. After your nationality will be revoked, you will be expelled out of the country forcibly. And the same time, whenever you are active and you could be targeted, your family could be targeted, and a lot of type of the discrimination is being imposed. Now the question is that, is this going to be like a continuous way of the government that they can have control? I believe it is going to be very short term, because it is opposing what we can believe that the security and the stability will be only maintained through a power share, through the human rights respects and the continuous political reforms. In absence on these three continuous demands of the basic rights, I think the stability will not be there. So I'm expecting that after a while, maybe we're gonna facing another wave of Arab Spring, more or less, because the people still, they think that their basic right as a citizen is not being demanded. We have a lot of financial service type of the demand is not being provided by the government, and considering that even they are not elected government. So I believe that in near future we can face another wave of the Arab Spring.
Now, you mentioned that there are parliamentary elections later this year. I'm assuming that you're not quite hopeful of the results of that, given what you've just told us about the way the government is structured.
Unfortunately, we can hear a lot of high quality type of the democratic values or names like election, municipality election, parliamentary election. Even we can see some human rights bodies within these governments, but it is only being used as a tool to whitewash these governments. For example, in Bahrain, when it comes to the parliamentary election, the National Assembly in Bahrain consists of two houses. The upper one, which is elected body, they have the all power, which is elected and appointed. It is appointed house, appointed by the king. They have the same number and the same power as elected house. Elected house, the constituency is being drawn by the king himself, and all the political oppositions groups is being banned by law after they pass a law, and then their members and the leaders are banned from any political participation. They cannot candidate themselves. They extended that one to include it over of any civil society's election, that they are being banned to be part of it. So they cannot be even part of any sport club or charity funds, or even any type of the unions, labor unions, or women union, and so on. So totally they are being banned to practice their basic political rights. So in such conditions, are you expecting to have free and fair election? Are you expecting to have a representative of the people through elected house? And even if we can have a few individuals, but with the limitation of their power, what they don't have the full power right to either to monitor or to pass legislation in favor of the rights of the people. So it will be end up like a decorative type, cosmetic type of the election, cosmetic type of the parliament. I believe that without agreement through a national dialogue to reach to the conciliation on having a free election, an independent judiciary, and legislation bodies, and elected or directly or indirectly governments, with that, and assuring that the full power of the parliament to be in service based on the one man, one vote, and for sure security for all. Without that one, we will not get a right track toward stability, security, and continuous reform. So once again, for sure, the coming election in Bahrain, in the absence of good governors and without any accountability and without adaptation of transitional justice, it will be really cosmetic once again, like it's been in 2012, 2014, 2018, and the coming one in November this year.
Now, RightsCon is at the intersection of human rights and technology, so I want to pivot to talk a little bit about that. During the Arab Spring, as you know, it was discovered that Bahraini pro-government hackers targeted human rights activists during that time with the software created by a German company, Finfisher, to try to spy on them. Nowadays, we have the Israeli company Pegasus, another software that many state actors have used, including states in the global south. And there's been a lot of media outcry, both during Finfisher and the case of Pegasus, the use of surveillance software by states, not for ostensibly law enforcement reasons, but to target activists. How do you think we can stop this? There's been so much media outrage and outrage among the activist communities, but it doesn't seem to stop these software surveillance companies from selling to states and from states from abusing them.
Unfortunately, this is one of the shame act by the some authorities in the MENA region, and it is so clear that Bahrain used this type of the spywares and either in 2010 and with this German type of the software for Finfisher. And many Bahraini activists during that time, they were been abroad, they've been targeted, and their emails and other software that they used to use has been targeted, and actively whatever they used to communicate has been monitored. And once again, as you indicated, the biggest one, the recent one, clear evidence being given, and many international media covered during that time that many Bahraini human rights defenders, not for once, even some of them, their mobile has been hacked for 8 times, like Ibtisam As-Sayegh, some other lawyers in Bahrain, and some are activists abroad. It is shown that it is like a systematic tactique and systematic methodology by these authorities to how to hack and try to penetrate all the electronic stuff or software of the activists. And I believe that now right time comes that internationally we have to pass international convention to prevent it and prohibit all the states to use such software. It is totally should be now illegal act, and whatever country will use it, there should be certain sequences and some type of the punishment to be applied. Without that one, I'm afraid that such bad act and wrong act will be continued by these authorities and governments.
Thank you so much. I want to turn to questions now. Someone is asking what your message is to governments that claim that protecting human rights goes against national security. This is something that I suspect is often repeated by many leaders of Gulf states. You've heard this one before.
Yes, I think unfortunately it is a claim not seriously that is willing to protect the basic rights of the human being. I think the main principle of any legislation which be passed with related to the security should be based on the human rights value. We cannot penetrate our basic rights due to the claim that because we want to protect the security. all that one should be within the international conventions that all of us we agreed to be within the mechanism of the United Nations. Without that one and without international agreement, which should be part of our basic human rights, I think this type of the legislations or the accusations shouldn't be accepted and should be rejected. Unfortunately, we know that so many governments, like Bahraini governments, they use a lot terminology of fighting the terrorism to target and limit the activities of the human rights defenders. So what they do, they try to amend so many local legislation to say that it is going to be targeted to fight against the terrorist act, but actually it is targeted against the activists and prevent them to practice their basic rights. So in short, most important that it should be within the boundary of the human rights, any legislation going to be passed, and within the boundary of international conventions, within the UN conventions.
Thank you. Now, a participant by the name of Abir wants you to comment on the situation with Tunisia and the status of the democracy there. I know there's sort of a problem with the parliament right now. I don't know how closely you follow Tunisia, but any thoughts on that country?
As a general rules is that any particular individuals, either he is a president or he is a king or whatever it's called, you shouldn't have the full power to freeze a constitution or to dissolve the parliament. And I believe that the democratic process are so clear on this regard. The basic thing that if there is any dispute, there should be either through a clear dialogue with all political parties and all the activists, and here emphasize the role of the NGOs. Secondly, the referendum, the going to the poll stations, to the elections, that should solve the problem, not to depend on the military, not to depend on dissolving a role of the parliament, not to depend on freezing any article of the constitution. Constitution should continue as active as all the time, and we should take any type of the military intervention away from any of our political disputes. Only through the dialogue and then agreeing to go to the early election, all that could be solved. But unfortunately, yet in Tunisia, that is not being practiced. And we believe on that the Tunisian political activities and the role of the NGO is so long. And I hope that all of them can get together and try to practice peacefully whatever pressure they can to maintain the democracy and to be as a model for the rest of the Arab world to have a transitional of power, in the same time a very democratic process to any changes occurring in this country.
Great, thank you. Another question is asking about how civil society around the world can support activists, especially those expressing themselves online, especially since activists are being targeted by their governments.
Yes, for sure, we need to enhance the role of the NGOs. I believe that any democratic process without the role of the NGOs is going to be a short one and going to be incomplete. We need to enhance the role of the NGOs, and we need to have a unity and more cooperation and contacts with NGOs internationally. As I can see now, it is good step and good indication that even UN bodies, they try to give a bigger room or more room for the NGOs. They are involving them now as an advisory board. They are giving them more in their campaigns, which is good indications. And we wish even that will be extended to the Human Rights Council, which is unfortunately, yeah, the Human Rights Council is representing the states, which we believe that the consultative status of the NGOs should be easier than it is, and more role of the NGOs. As much as we can, we have to engage NGOs in all UN mechanism, and we should demand the states that they should give further room for the power share of the NGOs in any process they do.
There's a question here that goes back to the issue of statelessness, which was at the start of our conversation. They're asking, could you unpack the impact of statelessness in the Gulf a bit more? They talk about Kuwait and also the fact that Qatar has deprived citizenship of a clan. There's also the UAE that has its own stateless population. Comment a little bit about that.
Unfortunately, the issue of the nationality in the Gulf is a little bit sensitive for the states. They look at totally as a sovereignty of the state, and without any type of the state of law, without any type of the, let me say, away from international conventions. States, they feel they have all the full rights, either to refuse the nationality of the people who already lived there centuries back, like Bidun in Kuwait. They have been deprived their rights. We have more than 200,000 Kuwaitis are stateless in Kuwait. Imagine you are living in Kuwait, your father, your grandfather lived in Kuwait, and they are been there so long time, centuries back, but you don't have any basic right of as a citizenship as being Kuwaitis. You've been deprived of your basic services by the government and so on. You don't have official documents, you cannot travel, you cannot have education, you cannot have birth certificate, you cannot get marriage so easily. As I said, it's totally like a social death. Or in another time, whenever there's a political dispute, your nationality will be revoked and you'll be expelled out of the country. This is so clear now in the Kuwait as a Bidun, and now we could see it's happened in Bahrain by revoking nationality, and unfortunately in Qatar, when some tribe they're being banned of their basic Qatari citizenship.
Jawad Fairouz, we have time for just a final remarks. Do you have any final thoughts before we wrap up?
I encourage all the activists, once again, sorry, my throat.
Yeah, have a drink of water. I'll have a drink of water as well.
Yeah, thank you. I think with the digital sphere and shrinking the distance among us as activists and as NGOs and all those who are demanding the change in this planet, we have to engage ourselves with our international events related to the human rights, democratic change, and so on. And once again, I emphasize a lot that we have to depend on the civil movement and away from any type of the violence, and we have to be managing all our act on the very peaceful manners. The change is coming. We have to be more patient but active at the same time. We should have clear vision that to maintain a peaceful planet through adaptation of democratic process and exchange of our old experience toward further establishing a stability and exchanging all our vision toward sustainable developments. And once again, I believe all that cannot be achieved without the human rights and basic rights, which been so cleared by the United Nations, and with our coordination, I think that we can manage it so for sure.
Thank you so much. And for ending on a hopeful message, Jawad Fairouz, thank you. We're very grateful for your time.
Thank you. Thank you very much, and good luck.
And for the rest of the RightsCon community, as always, enjoy your sessions and stay engaged. See you later.